A single unexpected remark turned an ordinary shopping trip into an unforgettable moment, one that forced everyone to confront themselves and the invisible prejudices they carry on a cold winter afternoon. The fading sunlight streamed through the glass windows of a small neighborhood grocery store, casting golden rays onto neatly arranged shelves. The atmosphere was calm, filled only with the soft hum of shopping carts rolling across the floor and the quiet murmurs of customers chatting as they browsed. Marcus, a black man in his early 30s, stood by the apple stand, dressed simply in a blue hoodie. His tall frame exuded quiet confidence, but his expression remained gentle. He reached out to pick up a bag of shiny red apples, his focus entirely on the items he needed. At the same time, an elderly woman named Gladys approached the same stand with her silver hair neatly pinned back and her movements deliberate. She extended her hand toward a bag of apples, unintentionally reaching for the same one Marcus had just grabbed. In that brief moment, her demeanor shifted. Her eyes narrowed as she paused to examine Marcus, and then she uttered a cold, cutting remark, "You don't belong here. Go back to Africa." The atmosphere in the store froze instantly. Shoppers nearby stopped in their tracks, their eyes darting toward the pair. Some stepped back, avoiding direct eye contact, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Gladys' words weren't long, but they carried enough weight to turn the entire store's mood. Heavy and tense, Marcus froze, the bag of apples still in his hand. His face briefly showed a flicker of surprise before it settled into calm resolve. He looked directly at the woman, but said nothing immediately. The atmosphere felt compressed, as if every sound in the store had vanished, leaving only the tension between two strangers who had never met before. Gladys's eyes were cold and unwavering, as though she fully stood by the words she had just spoken. There was no hesitation, no hint of regret. She adjusted her glasses slightly, as if to reaffirm the rightness of her stance in the situation. Marcus remained still, the bag of apples in his hand suddenly feeling as heavy as a ton of bricks. He exhaled slowly, his expression tinged with disappointment, though his patience remained steady. These words were not new to him, but that didn't make them hurt any less. "Ma'am," Marcus began, his voice warm yet firm, each word measured and weighted. "I'm not sure why you think I don't belong here, but perhaps you'd like to explain further." His voice wasn't loud, but each word sliced through the heavy tension in the air, forcing everyone nearby to take notice. A few customers who had initially tried to ignore the scene now stood still, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and unease. Gladys smirked, tilting her head slightly, as though incredulous that Marcus had dared to respond. "Explain? Why bother? Places like this aren't meant for people like you. It's just that simple." Those words, though brief, carried enough weight to leave others stunned. Marcus pressed his lips together, his gaze now different, no longer soft as it had been moments before. But instead of responding immediately, he placed the bag of apples back on the shelf, his hands falling to his sides, as if he were working to steady the emotions surging inside him. Around him, the tension in the air grew heavier. A young employee stacking bananas nearby froze mid motion, his eyes filled with worry. A couple standing by the bread aisle whispered to each other, their expressions a mix of discomfort and disapproval. "What's he going to do?" a woman nearby quietly murmured to herself. Marcus took a deep breath, then slowly turned back to face Gladys. He didn't raise his voice or lash out. Instead, he met her gaze directly, his eyes calm yet unyielding. "Ma'am," he began, his tone firm yet measured, "I think we can take a closer look at that. But first, let me share a story with you." The entire room seemed to pause. Marcus's words weren't just for Gladys, they felt directed at everyone in the store. The tension didn't subside, but the atmosphere shifted into something else entirely, a collective anticipation, a curiosity about what was coming next. And that was when Marcus began his story. Standing tall, his gaze never left Gladys. His voice was steady and warm, each word resonating like a bell in the silence of the store. "You just said, I don't belong here," Marcus began, his voice calm but carrying a strength that everyone could feel. "Then let me tell you about where I come from and why I belong here." He took a slow step forward, not in a threatening or aggressive way, but simply to ensure that everyone could clearly hear his story. "My great-grandfather," he said, his eyes brightened slightly, as if recalling a distant memory, "was taken from his homeland, forced onto a ship with hundreds of others, and sold like a piece of property. He wasn't given a choice, no say in his fate. but he ended up here in this very country and was forced to work the fields he would never own. The store seemed to grow even quieter. A few customers stopped shopping entirely, their attention now fully on Marcus. An older man near the produce section nodded slightly, as if Marcus's words had stirred something deep within him. My father, Marcus continued, his voice now firmer, fought in the Vietnam War. He returned home with medals, but he also carried scars, both on his body and in his heart. And when he came back, he wasn't allowed to eat in the same restaurants or be served in the same places as the people he had fought to protect. Gladys blinked, her hands tightening slightly on the handle of her cart, but she didn't say a word. The crowd around them had grown larger, their gazes fixed on Marcus, now filled with empathy and respect. And me. Marcus paused for a moment, his eyes now locking directly with Glade's. I'm a teacher. I stand in front of a classroom filled with children of all races and teach them that our differences don't make us weaker, they make us stronger. He stopped, letting his words settle into the silence. Everyone remained still, as if Marcus's story had forced them to confront something far greater than themselves. So Marcus continued, his voice now brimming with emotion. You say I don't belong here, but if my family has shed blood, sweat, and tears for this country, then I must ask you, who does belong here? Gladys stood frozen, her eyes no longer carrying the firm resolve they once held. She looked at Marcus, but not with disdain. Instead, there was something else, perhaps surprise or even shame. Marcus sighed, his gaze softening slightly. He didn't want to humiliate her, but he knew these words needed to be said. I'm not telling you this story to hurt you. I'm telling it so you understand that your words don't just insult me, they insult the generations who built this country. Once again, silence filled the space, but this time it wasn't awkward or heavy with tension. It was a silence of respect, a pause that created an opportunity for everyone, including Gladys, to reflect. Gladys remained silent after Marcus's words, but her hands gripped the handle of her cart even tighter. Her face showed a flicker of uncertainty, but her familiar stubbornness quickly returned. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes filled with indignation, and this time her voice carried a sharp anger. You think a few stories can change the truth? People like you always destroy everything we built. I've seen it my entire life, and I'm not changing my mind. Her words cut through the already tense atmosphere like a knife. A few people in the crowd froze, while others began whispering to one another. A middle-aged man standing nearby furrowed his brow, but said nothing, quietly pushing his shopping cart aside. Marcus held her gaze, his eyes now a blend of calmness and strength. As if carefully weighing his response, he took one step closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. When spoke, his voice was low and steady, yet carried an undeniable weight. You think I destroy things, or is it that you're letting the pain of your past decide how you see everything now? Gladys blinked, her hands trembling slightly, though her expression remained defiant. I know what I've seen, she shouted, her voice shaky but resolute. My father lost everything in a riot. Our small grocery store was destroyed. We had to struggle just to survive, all because of people like you. Those words plunged the room into silence. The crowd had grown larger by now, and their eyes shifted not just toward Marcus, but also toward Gladys. With a mix of sympathy and surprise, a woman standing near the bread aisle whispered to someone next to her, I had no idea she'd been through something like that. Marcus tilted his head slightly, his gaze softening, though his voice remained steady and resolute. I don't deny that you've been hurt, but do you think it's fair to lump all of us together with the people who wronged you? I'm not them, and neither is my family. He paused, letting his words settle into the air. A few people in the crowd nodded in agreement, a young employee standing nearby who had initially tried to ignore the scene now couldn't take his eyes off Marcus. Marcus continued, his tone now gentler, but still sharp with clarity. You've allowed the pain of your past to dictate how you see the present, and that doesn't just hurt you, it hurts innocent people too. My family has worked hard to build a life here just as your family once did. This world can get worse because of hate, but it only gets better when we choose to rise above it. Gladys looked at Marcus, her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Her eyes, no longer cold, now reflected uncertainty and hesitation. The silence in the store was deafening until a voice broke through from the crowd. He's right. All eyes turned toward an older man wearing a baseball cap who stepped forward. He looked at Marcus, then shifted his gaze to Gladys. His voice was raspy, but firm. We can't keep clinging to the past and forget that the present has value too. We can do better. Those words felt like they had cracked open a frozen barrier. A young woman standing near the bread aisle added, "My son is in Mr. Marcus's class. He's a good man, and this community needs people like him." Gladys glanced around, her face now flushed not with anger, but with embarrassment. Her hands gripped the handle of her cart as if searching for some sense of stability. Her defiance had faded, replaced by hesitation, as though she was wrestling with her own beliefs. Marcus exhaled softly, his gaze softening as well. He stepped back slightly, giving her space, and said, "I'm not trying to make you feel attacked. I just want you to understand that your words don't just hurt me, they keep you trapped in the past. But we all have the ability to do better if we're willing to try." Gladys said nothing, but her silence was no longer cold. The murmur in the crowd began again, though this time they carried tones of agreement with Marcus. A few people glanced at Gladys, not with judgment, but with expectation. They were waiting for an answer. Gladys stood still, her hands gripping the handle of her cart as if it were the only thing holding her steady. Her eyes moved across the crowd, lingering on the faces now watching her. No one uttered a word of criticism, but the silence itself seemed heavier than any condemnation. Press ing down on her. She took a deep breath, but when she opened her mouth, her voice was horror. "I don't know." Her words trailed off, as though she were searching for something to cling to but couldn't find it. Marcus looked at her, his gaze still kind and free of judgment. "It's okay, ma'am," he said, his voice warmer now. "Recognizing the problem is often the most important first step. The past can be heavy, but it doesn't have to hold us forever." Marcus's words brought silence once more, but this time it wasn't filled with tension. The heaviness had lifted. A few people in the crowd nodded in agreement, and a young woman smiled at Marcus, as if to offer her quiet support. Gladys looked at him, her eyes now reflecting something different, a flicker of doubt, introspection, and perhaps even a hint of regret. She gave a small nod, but said nothing more than moving more slowly than before. She turned and began pushing her cart toward the checkout line. The crowd slowly dispersed, returning to their shopping, but the atmosphere in the store had changed. A thoughtful silence lingered, as though everyone had witnessed something far greater than just an argument. When Marcus left the store, night had already fallen. The dim glow of the street lights cast long streaks of light across the cold pavement. He walked slowly to his car, his heart feeling both heavy and oddly light at the same time. Before opening his car door, Marcus noticed Gladys sitting in her own vehicle, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She stared straight ahead, her expression distant, as if wrestling with a storm of thoughts. Marcus hesitated, briefly considering walking over, but then decided against it. Some lessons take time to settle, he told himself, and he got into his car. That evening, Marcus sat with his father at the kitchen table. His father, an older man, with a quiet demeanor and calloused hands, rested them on the table. As he listened intently, Marcus recounted the incident at the store, from Gladys' cutting words to the subtle change he saw in her eyes. By the end, when Marcus finished, his father nodded, his weathered face reflecting deep understanding. "You did the right thing, Marcus. People like her don't change in a single moment, but you planted a seed, and sometimes all we can do is plant the tree and hope it grows." His father said. Marcus smiled, his eyes softening. "I just hope it actually grows," he replied. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice warm but firm. "It will. People like you, like your grandfather, have shown that hope always has value." That same evening, Gladys sat alone in her small kitchen. In front of her was a plate of untouched food, but she paid no attention. Instead, her gaze was fixed on the empty space in front of her, as if Marcus's words were still echoing in her mind. In her thoughts, the image of her father came to life, the man with calloused hands from years of hard work, his eyes filled with bitterness every time he spoke of the losses their family had endured. She had lived her entire life by his teachings: keep your distance, protect yourself. But now, for the first time, she began to wonder if that way of living had ever truly been right. Her hands trembled as she reached for an old photograph of her father on the table. Her eyes lingered on his faded smile in the picture. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she let out a deep sigh, as if she had finally begun to release a part of the burden she had carried her entire life. In the days that followed the story of what happened in the store spread through the community. Some spoke of Marcus's calm demeanor and patience, others mentioned the change they had seen in Gladys's eyes. As she walked away, the story was no longer just about two individuals. It became a reminder of the importance of confronting prejudice and hate. Marcus didn't seek attention, but his actions left a profound impact, and Gladys, she didn't change overnight, but she began to question, and sometimes simply asking the question is the first step. The story ends in silence, but it is not the silence of fear or indifference. It is the silence of reflection, of hearts beginning to change, and of small seeds being planted in the souls of those who hear it. This story is not just about Marcus or Gladys, it is about all of us. Each of us carries wounds, prejudices, or unresolved pain, but sometimes with just one moment, one conversation, and one small act, we can start to change not just ourselves, but the world around us. If this story has touched you, please share it. Let it spread to others as a reminder that kindness, compassion, and truth have the power to overcome hate. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this one. We may not be able to change the world in a single day, but with each story, each small act, we can contribute to building a better, more understanding world. Let's share this message together. Thank you for being part of this journey.